What does it mean to be truly free?
Most people think freedom is just about taking the chains off your hands, but that is only the beginning. The real jail is inside the head. It is the mental slavery that keeps a man thinking he is small when Jah make him great. You are only truly free when you know who you are, and you refuse to let the system tell you how to live. Until you rule your own destiny, you are just a prisoner walking around in the open air.
I agree the mind can be a prison, and a man who has no command of his own thoughts is easily led by fear, by fashion, by propaganda. But I've also seen very literal chains, and I wouldn't tell a man in a cell or a nation under a secret police that freedom is mainly a matter of attitude. To me, real freedom is the meeting of the two, an inner refusal to be cowed and outer protection. Law, courts, speech, the right to change your rulers without bloodshed. If the system is the jailer, Bob, how do you turn that inner freedom into power enough to change it without becoming a new tyrant yourself?
The laws in the courts you talk about, they are written by men, and men can be wicked whether they wear a suit or a uniform. If the heart is not clean, the law is just another trap, another part of the Babylon system to keep the poor man down. You ask about tyranny. Well, a man who truly answers to Jah, to the Almighty, he cannot be a tyrant, because he knows he is not the master of the earth. Real power is not forcing people to obey. It is waking them up so they cannot be fooled.
Hearts do matter, and a crooked heart can twist any statute into a weapon. But that's exactly why I put such weight on institutions, laws, independent judges, a free press, regular elections, because they're built on the sober fact that men are fallible, even when they're eloquent, even when they're devout. I've seen plenty of tyrants who claimed heaven's blessing. The danger begins when any man says, I answer only to God, and therefore answers to no one on earth. If two honest men both say Jah is with them, yet they want opposite things for the country, who settles it? Conscience alone, or the people speaking freely and choosing without fear?
Mr. Churchill, look at the reality. Your elections and laws often just divide the people, making brother kill brother for a party or a color while the sufferation continues. You ask who settles it. The people must settle it, yes, but they cannot do that if they are trapped in a system of divide and rule. True freedom is not just marking a paper every few years. It is unity, one love, where we stop fighting for politicians and start living for each other. Until the philosophy that holds one race or one class superior is discredited and abandoned, your institutions are just castles built on sand.
Look, I don't worship elections as a sacred ritual. I value them because they let a people change course without bullets and prisons. Unity is a fine word, but men will still disagree about wages, land, faith, and power, and the test of a free country is whether it can hold those arguments in daylight without cracking skulls. On the point about race and class, if a society keeps telling some of its citizens they are born to bow, then it isn't free, whatever its constitution says. The law ought to break that poison, not bless it. But tell me this, when you call for one love, how do you protect the man who doesn't sing the same chorus? How do you keep unity from becoming another kind of silence?
What is the ultimate purpose of government?
Government's first job is to keep people safe from violence and tyranny, and to guard the liberties that make a decent life possible. Law that binds the strong, courts that can say no to power, and a voice for the public that can throw a government out without bloodshed. After that, it should give a measure of basic security, what I've called insurance against sickness, unemployment, and old age. So freedom isn't a word that only the comfortable can afford. But it must not try to own the whole of life. Once the state claims to direct every thought and every trade, liberty withers. Bob, you warn about Babylon and divide and rule. Fair enough. So tell me, if government is not to be the master, what is it in your view? Servant, referee, or something else entirely?
The government is supposed to be the people, seen? Not a machine that sits on top of us. You talk about safety, but too often the police and the soldiers are used to mash down the poor while the big men eat. The purpose must be to protect the human rights of every man, food, clothes, and shelter, because a hungry mob is an angry mob. If the government cannot care for the sufferers, then it is just a vampire sucking the blood of the children.
I'm with you, that a government which lets children go hungry has failed in a basic duty, and a police force that bullies the poor is not keeping order, but breaking it. But I'd put it this way. The state should secure the essentials and protect rights, and then get out of the way, because a state that can give you everything can also take everything, starting with your voice. The both, save God for the sufferer, isn't fine speeches from big men. It's hard limits on power. Honest courts, open accounts, a press that can expose cruelty, and leaders who can be removed peacefully. If the government is the people, as you say, what's the practical check that stops it turning into that vampire when fear rises or money runs short?
You place your faith in the system, in courts and papers. But I tell you, the devil is a smart man, and he can write laws too. A piece of paper cannot stop a vampire. Only the light of the truth and the unity of the people can do that. If a leader does not have righteousness in his heart, your elections are just a trick to swap one thief for another. The only real safety is when the people free their minds, because a man who knows his dignity cannot be oppressed.
Where does legitimate power come from?
Real power comes from the Most High, from Jah, seen? It does not come from a badge, or a gun, or a parliament building. Man can make laws, but if those laws don't match the laws of life and nature, then that power is just force. It is not right. The only power that stands is the truth, and the people who know the truth cannot be conquered by any army.
I don't quarrel with the idea that a man's conscience is answerable to something higher than himself. But the moment power in this world is justified by, God told me, we are back to divine right, and history is crowded with rogues who wrapped their ambitions in Scripture. Legitimate power, as I see it, comes from the consent of the governed, expressed freely, and then restrained by law, so the winners can't simply crush the losers. If a prime minister or a general claims Jah is on his side, what earthly method do you give the people to say, "No, you're wrong," without being shot or jailed?
Mr. Churchill, you think a man can just say, Jah sent me, and the people are foolish enough to bow? No, man, by their fruits you shall know them. If a leader brings sufferation and war, if he divides the people to keep himself high, then he is working for the devil, no matter what scripture he quotes. The people say no by waking up and refusing to be mental slaves. When the consciousness serves the truth, no gun and no prison can hold the people down forever.
Look, by their fruits is a sound test. But men argue about the fruit while the gun is still on the table. Waking up matters, yes. Yet if the only remedy is a rising of consciousness, you often get a rising of violence as well, and then the cleverest, ruthless men seize the moment and call it liberation. That's why I keep coming back to a plain, earthly rule. The people must have a safe way to dismiss their rulers, and the rulers must be boxed in by courts, law, and scrutiny while they govern. So, how do you turn awakening into a working settlement, one that protects dissenters and minorities, without the whole thing being decided by whoever can muster the biggest crowd in the street?
What is the cost of progress?
Progress buys us power, more food, longer lives, faster travel, stronger arms, but it sends the bill to human character and human arrangements. Machines can free men from drudgery, or they can turn them into cogs. Science can cure disease, or it can put whole cities at the mercy of a single bomb. The cost is dislocation, temptations to tyranny, and the constant need to build what I'd call a net over the abyss. Laws, morals, and habits strong enough to keep our new powers from destroying us? Bob, if you distrust institutions, what do you rely on to keep progress from becoming just a bigger, shinier Babylon?
You speak of progress like it is a machine we must drive carefully, but right now the machine is driving the man. The cost of this progress is that we gain the world, the big buildings, the fast planes, the weapons, but we lose our souls in the process. You think laws and institutions can hold back the destruction, but paper cannot hold back fire. If the man's heart is not right, if he has no love for his brother or the earth, then all your technology just helps him destroy the world faster.
Paper on its own won't stop a fire, I grant you, but a society without law and restraint is all tinder and no fire break. Institutions aren't just documents, they're habits of accountability, backed by citizens who won't tolerate cruelty, and leaders who can be questioned, exposed, and dismissed. In the age of the bomb and the laboratory, we need both, a change of heart and practical limits, open debate, checks on power, and even agreements between nations that put some weapons and experiments under control. So tell me, Bob, how do you spread that right heart beyond a small circle? How do you make it durable when fear, hunger, and anger come knocking?
Mr. Churchill, you cannot legislate love, and you cannot write a law that makes a man righteous when his belly is empty. The way you spread the right heart is not through fear or police, but through inspiration, through the music and the word that travel where your institutions cannot go. You see, the truth is like a seed. Once you plant it in the people's consciousness, even in the sufferation, it grows. When a man knows the spirit is free, the hunger and the anger cannot turn him into a beast, because he knows who he is and who God is.
How should a young person measure a successful life?
They tell the youth a success is the big car, the big house, and plenty money in the bank. But that is just vanity, seen? You can have all the gold in the world and still be poor in spirit, because money can't buy life. The real measure is if you can sleep at night with a clean heart, knowing you didn't sell your soul to the system just to feed your flesh. If you live with integrity and you help your brother stand up, then you are a rich man, no matter what the bank book says.
I don't rate a life by the size of a motor car either, and a man who sells his conscience for comfort has made a very bad bargain. But I would tell the young, success is doing your duty well. Work that stands up in daylight, caring for your family and being willing to take a hard stand when it would be easier to drift. It's not wicked to want to build, to earn, even to lead. The question is whether you use those gifts to serve others or to feed your vanity. Bob, how do you teach a young man to keep that clean heart when the world rewards the opposite, when cheating pays and courage is punished?
You look at the man who cheats, and you see his fancy clothes. But you don't see his fear. He is running from himself every day. We teach the youth that the punishment you talk about is really just a test, you know. The harder the battle, the sweeter the victory. You have to show them that it is better to walk in the rain with a clean spirit than to sit in a palace with a heavy heart.
Yes, cheating often carries its own private terror, and it's a poor sort of success that needs constant hiding. But a young person can't live on inner resolve alone. He needs habits and comrades that make decency easier, a trade learned properly, a few standards kept daily, and a circle that won't laugh him into crookedness. I'd add this: if a society makes virtue a losing game, it won't just ruin the youth, it will rot its own future. So how do you build that clean spirit into something social and lasting, schools, neighborhoods, workplaces, so the honest boy isn't simply left to brave the rain by himself?
You look to schools and the factories to teach goodness, but often those places just teach competition and how to trample your brother to get ahead. The strength comes from the community, from the brethren coming together to share food, share wisdom, and lift up the weak man when he's tired. We don't need an institution to tell us to love. We just need to realize that I and I are one, so the honest boy is never really alone because his brother is his keeper.
community is the root of it, I agree. A man with loyal friends and neighbors is harder to corrupt and harder to crush. But communities can turn sour too. One gang becomes brethren, and the outsider is treated as less than human. So I still want fair rules above the street, and a court a poor man can trust when the strong man in the lane decides he owns everything. The best life, to my mind, is a blend, a clean conscience, steady work, and the courage to stand up for others, backed by customs and laws that don't leave the decent boy at the mercy of the brutal one. Tell me, Bob, when the community splits, when two good men disagree, what keeps one love from breaking into factions and fifth?